So basically, welcome everyone to my presentation about Zionist discourses about the Arab man and woman. So basically, today I will be exploring a topic that you might think that you might have heard of, maybe, or maybe you thought about it for a certain point. However, I try to adjust an existing American Zionist discourse into actually justifying what's going wrong in Gaza. So basically, my presentation topic is about between sexuality and racism, framing of Arabs for conquest. So basically, I'm trying to explore how the Arab man and woman are framed in Zionist discourses. So I'm gonna start. It's gonna take a bit of time to go to the other slide. I'm sorry, it's just.
Take your time, Alice. Nobody expects for tech to operate perfectly in a situation like yours. Take your time.
Thank you so much. Um, I think this is where, okay, this is works. So basically, I'm gonna start with a quote from Edward Said, a Palestinian author, in which he said, "They recognize the power of the family, know the weaknesses of the Arab mind, remark the importance of the Oriental world to the West, but never say what their discourse implies, and what is really left to the Arab after all is said and done is an undifferentiated sexual drive." I just want to say that as an Arab woman myself, I can't deny that they have been trying to sexualize women, men, and our people in general. And this is what Edward Said is trying to show, because basically he is saying that they know the weaknesses of the Arab mind and they try to frame it in a sexual way. So basically, everything that's left to us to be defined with is for us to be primitive, irrational, and maybe sometimes barbaric. So basically, I'm just trying to understand this discourse and how it was implied by the Zionists in order to dehumanize the dehumanize the like the actual violence that occurred in Gaza or what's occurring right now in South Lebanon. I'm gonna move to my next slide. Okay, so basically these sexual tropes that we have been hearing about since the Algerian War, the times where the French were broadcasting sexual jokes and sexual tropes about the Arab men and women, now they're being utilized again, unfortunately. However, they are being used to mask the dehumanization and sexualize the violence on the Palestinian. It was also used as a laughable content to be disseminated through social media, and I know that most of you girls know about what I'm talking about because I spend most of my time on social media, unfortunately. So basically, I just keep on scrolling and I see people making fun of whatever is going on with Palestinians. And then finally, it was used as a tool to control and frame the reproduction of Palestinians after the 1948 Nakba. So what I mean by that will be verified even more right now. So basically, as an Arab, I don't think we have a purely constructed image of ourselves because we already have an existing one written by the white supremacist. So basically, unfortunately, the Arab men are framed as violent, untamed sex animals that pose a threat to white women. And I will be giving examples in the next slide. I will just make sure to show you the paradox that's occurring here. And now the Palestinian men are portrayed as sex traffickers that enjoy the suffering of white women. So basically, we have an already existing narrative, and then it's adapted because the Arab men and women were not sexualized since yesterday. They have been sexualized since the beginning of ancient times. And then we have the Arab woman, which is framed as a servant to the man rather than his companion. And then the Palestinian woman that was targeted during the war of Gaza as the weak chain of the society by the Zionists to induce fear. So basically, I'm going to talk about the key narrative drivers of these certain stories. So basically, first, as you know, we have Hollywood, which is the cinema of the U.S. So basically, they just keep on emphasizing the same image about Arabs, especially in movies like The Jewel of the Nile. So basically, in The Jewel of the Nile, there's a religious man who purposefully kidnaps white European women in order to do inappropriate stuff to them. And then later on, they also adapted the same narrative into another movie called The Promised Land. So basically, it was also depicts that there's sex trafficking occurring in the land of Palestine, or as they call it, Israel. So basically, they just keep on repeating the same narrative until it became a commemoration, until it became an association with the actual identity of the Arabs. And then we have Alexander Koufe, which is an American archaeologist, in which in one of his articles he explored the psychology of the Palestinians. And I quote that he said, Israelis being murdered, kidnapped, or even just rocketed are causes to hand out sweets to strangers in the street, to publicly affirm and to invite others to affirm the pleasure and suffering of others. This is a cultural psychology of objectification and dehumanization. So basically, he's just talking about how Palestinians become happy when the former occupants just are being murdered or killed, as they are saying. And then we have Raphael Pate, which talked about the woman, especially the Arab woman, and he framed them as purposefully only born to serve the man and obey them. And also, this the same picture was also emphasized by Daniel Pipes, which is an American anti-Muslim activist, in which he also said that Muslim women were born to serve the man, obey them, and submit to their desires. And I just want to point out something, and is that, as we can see here, it's the cinema of the US, the American archaeologists, the Hungarian Jewish ethnographers, and the American anti-Muslim activists who have always something to say about the Arab woman and man. And now we move on to the same narrative, however, it's gonna be switched. So basically now the dehumanizing mask, in which is the humor and the repetitive memes that we hear about Islam, about how they are terrorists and somehow they are weak, about sometimes how they submit to others and sometimes they are a threat to others. So basically, the Arab men are now shown in caricatures as submissive and under the mercy of terrorism, and I will show it later on. And the Palestinian man suddenly is sexually fragile and weak, but however, like, weren't they sexually driven animals like a few moments ago? And then we have the Arab woman as outgoing creatures who would do anything to gratify their desires, and the Palestinian woman being sexually outgoing and wild to be tamed through conquest. So basically, I just want to like emphasize this shift in the narrative because it's not about only how we perceive it, it's about how they want us to perceive it. So basically, sometimes we're like submissive and under the mercy of terrorism, and other time we're just wild and outgoing. And now this is what I'm talking about. Like, as you can see, the supposedly sexually driven animals are now kneeling in front of terrorists, as we can see here, as the word Islam is being spelled with their bodies. And now we have Lama Khater, which is a Palestinian journalist who was threatened with rape by the IDF soldiers after they hold her captive just because she tried to resist them. So basically, now resistance is an act of temptation rather than actual resistance against the IDF soldiers. And I just want to point out something else is that while I was searching for Lama's Khater picture, the Google search gave me Lama Khater terrorist. So I just want to point out what's going on with the media, especially that she was held active by the IDF soldiers. She was not the one who was holding them active. And finally, coming out to the last part of my presentation, which is reproduction as a threat. So basically, as we know that the Arabs are framed by the media as people who reproduce uncontrollably. So basically, we see these memes of the Arab man and woman having about 10 to 12 people around them. And this specific image was very emphasized by Thomas Edward Lawrence, which is again a British archaeologist, in which he said that the man has the right to control how many children the Arab family can get, while the woman is asked only to endure. So basically, they're trying to hide the fact that the existence of the Palestinian or the Arab family is a threat to the existence of Zionism in itself. Because otherwise, why would they cut the electricity on the hospitals containing tens or even hundreds of children who need oxygen? I mean, otherwise, the Palestine, like, I'm sorry, I just got the call. So basically, the Arab Palestinian family, whether it was extended or limited, will always pose a threat to the Zionist existence. And finally, going to my conclusion, which is I'm very proud of because I was able to come up with something like this. So basically, I wrote in my conclusion in my paper that the history books that the Zionists rely on glorify displacing people from their land as a way of self-defense. When they think that the Arabs are the ones who are not reading history books, it seems like theirs is forged enough to justify genocide with soft words. And as people that we are attending an anti-Zionist and an uh, archival seminar, I think this speaks volumes by itself. And I don't think that any of this needs any type of explaining because it's just shown it was just shown like throughout the whole presentation. And I think that's it. Thank you so much. Any questions, I would be gladly answering them, and these are my resources.